In this video, we're going to set up RapidMiner to extract data from the XBRL database. All right, now RapidMiner uses something called JDBC, that's Java database connectivity. So I'm going to start up RapidMiner. And my initialization or welcome screen with RapidMiner, I'm going to go ahead and just go to a blank process. The first thing we're going to do in RapidMiner is we're going to add an extension that enables the JDBC connectivity to a variety of different databases. And I'm going to do that by clicking on Extensions and then go to Marketplace. All right. And in here, you can see lots of different tabs for what you own, what some of the top rated or top downloaded extensions are. We're just going to go ahead and do a search. So I type in database and click the search button. And you'll see a number of different database extensions that you can get. The one we're interested in is called in-database processing. All right. So it came up second in my list. You may have to scroll up or down just depending on what you have or how it sets things up. But find this one in database processing. And then just make sure you click this little button down here that says select for installation. Now at this point, I might go and look at some other extensions and continue to install additional extensions. I already have a fair number on my RapidMiner, so I'm just going to go ahead and click install this one package, and I'm ready to go. So I click install one package. The next screen that comes up is the list of license terms. I'll agree to those and go ahead and continue with the installation. And finally, once the packages have been downloaded, RapidMiner tells me, well, I need to restart to load up these extensions now. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so I get right back into RapidMiner. I'll go ahead and start a blank process again. And I'm assuming you have some experience with RapidMiner or have done at least some work on it, which is why you've chosen this tool. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a connection. So connection, create connection. I can go into my local repository and expand that and expand my connections and also choose create connection from there as well. So either way I do it, right click or connections, create connection. Don't worry about the legacy connections options. We're just going to create a connection using the current approach. So the connection type will be a database, and I'm going to keep this connection in my local repository, so we're good there. I'll just stick with the defaults, and then I'll give this connection a name, XBRL Edgar database. All right, so I create that, and then the next screen comes up and gives me the opportunity to enter more details now about this database I'm going to connect to. So the first thing is, well, what kind of database system is it? And you see there's a variety of databases you can connect to, including PostgreSQL. You will type in your user ID, and this will be something that has been provided to you either by your instructor, or you may have gotten it directly from XBRL or from FASB. Password. I'm going to leave the configure URL automatically selected, and then my host, instead of localhost, I'm going to type in the URL for the host system that the XBRL database is stored on. So that's public .xbrl.us. 5432 is the port. That's the traditional port for a PostgreSQL database to reside on a server. The database we'll be logging into is called Edgar_DB. Again, all lowercase, so you want to make sure you follow the upper and lowercase exactly as you see, or as exactly as you're provided as you work your way through this. I can test my connection. I always recommend doing that when you key this in. If you get a failure, let's say I forget to type in my Edgar DB. So I test my connection. Can't find the database. All right. So, can't connect. So now I fix it and I'll test my connection and I get the test successful message. And now I can continue. So I'll just save that. And now I've got a new connection over here, XBRL Edgar database. So from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that into my process workspace. And you can see it automatically names it retrieve this connection, retrieve XBRL Edgar database. And that's good. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to bring that into the process. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to read the database. So if I type in read database, and then I'll find this one here. I want the one that says read database all the way spelled out. So I'm going to drag that into my workspace as well. And then just connect the two. So I'll connect the output port from retrieve XBRL Edgar database to the connection port. I'm basically sending a connection to this read database. And if you look over here, so I've already shown which entry in the repository I'm using for my retrieve XBRL. Here, I might want to give my operator here a new name. So instead of read database, I'm going to say query XBRL Edgar database. Okay. And over here, you can see what am I going to do? Well, yeah, it's going to be a query. I can actually bring in a file that has the query in it or a specific table, but I'm just going to run a query. I can open up the query building tool here, and it brings up a list of all the tables that are in the database, and I can use this to visually build my query a field at a time, a bit like you might in Access. It's a little clunkier than what you have in Access, but in my case, I'm just going to put the query in myself, and I can enlarge this and have more space to work with. So in my case, I'm just going to key in the query directly. So depending on your instructor, you will build your query from scratch, build it using a visual building tool, or you'll, in any case, you're probably going to tweak the query just depending on what you're going to be doing with it. So I click OK. And you may build your query from scratch. Your instructor may provide it to you with some places for you to substitute your parameters if you're looking for a particular range of SIC codes, etc. So everything else I will leave as is. So I've got my data management set up there. It's good. So next, I need to have something to do with this query once it's done running. So one of the first things I might do, I can save the results of the query in my repository. So in this case, I'm going to use an operator called store. So I type that in, there's a store operator, and I'm going to bring the output of the query. So again, the connection, I can continue to pass the connection on to other activities as well. But in this case, I'm working directly with the output, and I want that to go to my store. And that means it's going to go somewhere in my repository here. So I'm going to tell it to put it in my local repository, in my data folder, and I'm going to call it XBRL Edgar query results. All right. And you can see I can pass whatever comes in here through. So I may also want to create a file. So in this case, I'll just say write. And you can see I can write to a number of different file formats. In this case, I'll just write a CSV. And again, I'll pass the connection through to the input port of write CSV. And you can see there are a few more parameters here to work with. First thing, I need to give it the name, the file name. So I'm going to go to my downloads folder, and I'll just give it a similar name, XBRL Edgar query results. So I click open there, and now, even though it says it's CSV, you can put any column separator in there that you want. So that's a little bit tricky. By default, it's going to put a semicolon in there, which is a common delimiter. The vertical bar is another common delimiter that you might see used. But in this case, we just want to use comma. So we'll do a comma and make it a true CSV, comma separated values file. I would like the attribute or field names on the first row, so it's going to include those. Put quotations around nominal values. Okay, sure. I can tell it how I want the date to be formatted. I can also say, well, if the file already exists, just add to the end. If this is unchecked, like I'm going to leave it, it just replaces it. And then, depending on what kind of system you're moving it to, a Unix or an IBM mainframe or something, you can change the actual encoding, but I'll just stick with the system encoding. All right. And then I can finally connect this through to my results port over here at the end of my process, so I can just visually see what I have here on my screen when I run the process. And that's all there is to it, really. So now when I run it, I just click the run button or press the F11 key on my keyboard. And this ran fairly quickly because I have set this up with a 100 record limit. So be prepared for your process to run longer once you get all of the years and all of the element names that you're trying to extract from the database for all of your industry codes. All right, so here I can see I've got my 100 records. Or actually, in this case, I've got 6,373 because I didn't turn the filter on, but I'm only selecting for 1 year. If you're selecting for multiple years, you may get, up to 100,000 or maybe slightly more records returned. And the more years that are included, the database seems to be organized by year. The more years that are included, the longer your query will run. In general, it should take about 5-6 minutes for a large query. If the system's extremely busy, if you're doing it in the middle of the workday, it may take longer. All right, so I've got my results here. I can go back to my design. I can now see in my data, in my repository, I've got my XBRL data or Edgar query results. So I can open that up, take a look at it. It's basically the same thing we just looked at. And I can take a look at stats on the various data fields and build visualizations, real quick and dirty visualizations right here within the tool. I also have the results sitting on in my computer in a CSV file. So when I open that up, I'm just going to open it up with Notepad. You can see what it looks like. I'm going to turn word wrap off. So I've got my field names right here at the beginning on the first row. And then each record has the values for each of the fields up at the top with commas in between them, and then quotation marks whenever necessary. All right. So that is getting your process put together in RapidMiner. And at this point, I can now save this process. So I'll go ahead and save it in my repository under processes, and I will call it XBRL Edgar database query. All right, so that is it for getting yourself up and running with RapidMiner. Hopefully your query results are good and you're able to use them for the next part of your project.